Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching.
Anna and Alice laughed merrily, discussing the boys from their village. Their laughter could be heard all over the station, and only Diana, sadly lowering her head, was silent. She was holding a card in the shape of a heart, which Victor had once given her for Valentine's Day. It was the only good memory she had of him. Noticing the sadness on Diana's face, Anna took her hand and quietly said, "Well, stop it. Are you seeing us off to study or to the funeral?" "You can say either." Diana shook her shoulders and replied, "You are going to study further. The second year is ahead. I hope that you will make good medics." Anna laughed, followed by Alice. "Did I say something wrong?" Diana asked without any sadness. "No, it's all right," answered Alice. "And as for the wake, Anna is right. We are saying goodbye to another vacation. But don't be sad, you have studies ahead of you too. And it doesn't matter that you had to go to the correspondence department." "Well, I asked you to," Diana begged. That's it, I understand. I won't do it anymore," waved her friend's hands. "But you, after all, in vain refused the money. You could have gotten rid of the pregnancy and there would have been no problems. And so, now alone we'll have to bring up the child when it is born. Isn't Victor ashamed of leaving such a beautiful girl?" "Stop it. I'm sick of it." Diana repeated her request. "And I don't want to talk about it anymore." Diana really tried to forget the day when she met Victor. At first he treated her with love, gave her flowers, wooed her beautifully. But when he found out she was pregnant, he decided to leave her. It seems that all majors do this. They do not want to take responsibility and smoothly disappear. She was forced to go to the correspondence department of the Pedagogical Institute. The thing is that there were constant friction with teachers. They time and again reproached her for recklessness. In addition, all sorts of nagging, trying as much as possible to prick in a sore spot. These circumstances greatly depressed Diana, and she walked more and more often in a depressed state. And now, seeing her friends off to study in the big city, she couldn't squeeze out a little bit of joy. Finally, the bus arrived at the platform. The friends had 3 hours to get to their destination. There were no opportunities to get higher education in the district center, so they had to travel long distances for the sake of a bright future. Diana hugged each of them in turn and then watched them take their seats on the bus. After the boarding announcement, the bus doors closed, it hummed shrilly and moved off. Diana moved a little farther away to avoid breathing the exhaust fumes. Her friends waved from the window. Diana gave them a kiss, and the bus gracefully disappeared around the corner. Next to the bus station was the train station, and a little to the side was a spontaneous market. Diana decided to walk there to look for a spacious dress. The thing is that her tummy began to grow, and it was necessary to hide it somehow. Passing by the station building, the girl noticed the bustle. People were rushing about their business without noticing anyone around them. Some arrived and were greeted with joy, and others, on the contrary, left. And people close to them did not hide their emotions, seeing them off on their long journey. It was interesting to watch how the railroad station fills up and immediately becomes empty, but only for a moment, to again shelter under its roof guests and just ordinary passersby. And at that moment Diana saw a guy near the train. He stood with his hand outstretched, asking for money. In appearance he was no older than herself, but how embarrassing it was for him to ask people for help. Diana felt ashamed, as if she was the one standing there collecting money. At the same time, the guy did not try to annoy passersby. He did not run up to them and did not pull their sleeves to give them money. On the contrary, he stood quietly and talked about the fact that he needed money to buy a ticket. Unable to watch him humiliate himself any longer, Diana decides to approach him and help. After all, collecting money did not give the desired result. Many people just passed by, and some even twiddled their thumbs. It seems that no one wanted to penetrate his problem. Nobody cared why this guy suddenly found himself without money and couldn't buy his own ticket. "Hi," Diana said cautiously. "Hi," the guy replied also discreetly. "Here, take the money for the ticket." Diana gave him the crumpled bills and lowered her head. "Thank you, but you probably need it more yourself." The stranger wanted to refuse the money. "No, it's okay. I still have some. By the way, I'm Diana. And what's your name?" "Henry," he said, "and I thank you again for your help. Hurry up and buy a ticket, or the train will leave without you." Diana said cheerfully. Edward broke away from his seat and ran towards the station. Diana, meanwhile, remained guarding his bag. It was unclear what was in it, and it was not in her principles to rummage through other people's things. The train began to hum and seemed to be about to depart. The boy came at the very last moment, and together they came to the open door of the carriage. Henry handed the conductor the ticket, but she glanced at him and said, "I'm not going to let some vagabonds in. You'll stink up the whole carriage, and then I'll have to clean and air you out." It was the height of insolence, and Diana even wanted to argue with her. But time was running out and it was necessary to solve the problem as soon as possible. So she took the last of her money out of her pocket. "Take it, I don't have any more, but put this guy on the train." The conductor snorted as she took the money from her and pushed Henry into the car. The boy flew into the vestibule, but managed to look out and wave to Diana. She saw him crying, and she wanted to burst into tears. Holding back her emotions, she raised her hand and waved. And then she heard these words. "Thank you, I'll pay you back," Henry shouted, and the train was tapping its wheels. Knock, 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 and taking the boy out of this town and back to where he was in such a hurry. Diana only shook her head in response. She had no hope that Henry would ever pay her back. They met by chance at the train station, and it wasn't clear what he was doing here. There was no time to ask, especially since the guy was in a hurry. So it turned out to be a date on a light, when no one owed anything. The money she'd given him was her last, and now Diana had to walk to the village. It was good that it was 3 kilometers from the center. As she walked, she thought about how she had gotten herself into this situation. Diana grew up in a poor family. Her father was injured in a factory and lost his right leg to the knee. He was granted disability, and in fact, the main provider in the house was her mother. She worked almost 24 hours a day on the farm to feed the family. My father's pension was modest and allowed only to receive benefits for utility bills and to ride public transportation at a discount. Mom tried her best to help her daughter. She herself said that she did not want the same fate for her. She had plans to educate Diana, bring her up and send her to the big city. One day they were sitting at dinner and her mother said sadly, "Daughter, you don't belong in the country. I'm used to this kind of life, but you should live better. And now the main thing is to get an education. It will give you a ticket to the future." This conversation took place on the eve of the final exams at school. And Diana was also thinking about moving to the city. She wasn't going to work on a farm like her mom. She had enough knowledge to further study and gain experience. Having entered the pedagogical institute, Diana already made plans for her future. But in the second year she met Victor and soon became pregnant by him. Everything happened suddenly, and at first Diana was afraid to tell her mother about it. But then she confessed, and the latter advised her to give birth. After all, it is not known what will happen next, and suddenly she will no longer be able to have children. With this thought, Diana decided to study by correspondence, especially since her friends supported this idea. Although they studied in different institutes, but they were not indifferent to Diana's fate. Victor, who got her pregnant, turned out to be unreliable, so he dumped her the first chance he got. Or rather, it wasn't even his decision, it was his parents. They insisted that he didn't need a girl from a poor family. So they found him a beautiful girl from a wealthy family, and they told Diana to forget the whole thing. True, and offered her money to get rid of the pregnancy. However, the girl refused and left their house forever. The provincial girl turned out to be of no use to anyone. With her naivety and faith in pure love, Diana for many years put a cross on her personal life. She no longer had the strength and desire to look for someone. Though the son of a rich farmer was a matchmaker, hinted at getting together and living together. He was even prepared to take in another man's child, but Diana had to refuse his advances because he was a promiscuous alcoholic. After that, she was even more squinted at. They had not been kind to her before, and now they were spreading gossip throughout the village. Many of them said she had fathered a child. How can you hide that fact? No matter how you look at it, but the belly, rounded in size, spoke for itself. And no exhortations of the mother did not help. The villagers did not want to hear anything. Everyone was interested in discussing the poor girl. Not a single car passed by, and she had to walk all the way to the village. It was as if the villagers were in no hurry. And there was no fuss, which was going on at the station of the district center. It was good that there were occasional stumps of recently felled trees by the roadside. Diana could sit down on them and catch her breath. The village appeared ahead, and the girl breathed a sigh of relief. But what would her parents say when they found out that she had given the last of her money to a stranger? Diana did not think about it, but decided that she would not be scolded as soon as they heard the story of saving a poor guy. Her mother, of course, took it calmly, but her father grumbled for a long time. Nothing cannot trust her, the last money from the house gives. And why are you angry? His mother reprimanded him. Do you help your daughter a lot? She hasn't heard a kind word from you lately. Stop that attitude, or I'll find something to keep you busy. His father glanced at his mother, but did not interfere. He was afraid of his wife, because she was, in fact, the head of the family. But if we talk about the period when he was not yet an invalid, then even then he was not useful. Well, he earned money as a fitter at the factory, and then he spent part of his salary with his colleagues. On the other hand, he was not an alcoholic, and he was still treated with respect in the village. Diana thanked her mother for her support and admitted that she couldn't do otherwise. Understand, Mom, he asked for money for a ticket, not for fun. Who knows what happened to him? Maybe he was robbed. That's it, that is not clear, my daughter. Anxiously and excitedly replied Alice. So you take care of yourself, do not mess with strangers. You've already had enough grief. I don't want you to be completely lost. Don't worry, it won't happen. Diana answered sadly and went to her room. She was so afraid that her parents would scold her for giving the money, but it turned out to be the opposite, and if it hadn't been for her father's nagging, she would have been able to say that she had gotten off lightly. In her heart, Diana hoped that the money had helped the boy, and he'd get home, if he really was in a hurry. The earth was round, and it was possible that they would meet again someday. At least that wasn't to be ruled out. Almost 10 years had passed since then. Diana had graduated from the institute and had already been working as a teacher for several years. She moved to the city as she saw no prospects for herself in the village. Her mother remained working on the farm, still receiving a negligible salary. Her father died 2 years ago. He had a heart attack due to excessive alcohol consumption. He could not adapt to the new realities of life. He could not find his place and was always angry that he had become an invalid. Diana rented an apartment in the city through an acquaintance and lived there with her son. She had a baby boy whom she named John. His mother asked that he be named after his grandfather. Then one day she came to visit her herself. Walking around the apartment, Alice kept saying, "All of me, businesswoman. Here, I see and wash laundry as I taught you. I can't believe it's been so long. I still remember my little daughter. Ma, I'm sorry that we see each other so rarely." Diana hugged her mother and cried. When John saw that the adults hugged and sobbed, he came up to them and said, "Mom, Babs, don't cry. Everything will be okay." Diana took him by one hand and Alice by the other. They stood like that until they heard the kettle whistling in the kitchen. "Stop crying and let's go and have tea and cake," Alice commanded and led everyone to the table. She cut equal slices and put them on plates, and while John was eating the pie, Alice moved closer to her daughter and asked in a whisper, "You're going to live alone?" "I don't know what you mean." Diana was surprised. "I'm not alone. I have a handsome son and we are good together." "I'm not arguing," the mother replied. "You just need to think about yourself. Maybe you have someone in mind, a teacher from school." "No, Mom, we have almost all women there." "True, the gym teacher and the labor teacher are men, but it's better not to mess with them. One of them flirts with everyone and has nothing serious in his head, and the other one sometimes gets a little over the collar. But the director doesn't fire him because there's no one to work with. Nightmare, and where all the normal men have gone." Alice complained with a heavy sigh. "You should have stayed in the village. Maybe you found someone." "You are serious?" Diana smiled confusedly. "I do not need such happiness. And as for personal life, there is one man with whom I sometimes meet." Alice immediately revived and putting on her daughter's plate a piece of pie, said, "That's fine. We should take him into the fold." "Mom, I'll figure out what to do with him myself." Her mother did not ask her any more provocative questions. She realized that Diana was no longer a little girl and would decide how to live her life. And if she did not hurry with marriage, it means that there are good reasons for it. And to rush things is to make mistakes that life does not forgive. Diana's admirer turned out to be Alexander, a middle manager. He'd been trying to win her favor for a long time. They met by chance when Diana was shopping at the mall. She needed to get the boxes of instant cereal, but they stood so high that she couldn't reach them. And then Alexander walks by. Naturally, he decided to help and took as many as 5 boxes off the top shelf. Diana thanked him for his help, and then she did not notice how they reached her house together. From that day on, a whole series of attempts to ask her out began. All week, Alexander called Diana and invited her, then to the movies, then to the disco, then to a cafe or restaurant. Notwithstanding such pressure, she, however, gave up and they began to meet. Happy for her daughter, Alice wished her happiness, and a couple of months later learned that Diana and Alexander, after all, decided to live together, though without official registration of marriage. Surprisingly, but the family evening decided to make in the village, and Diana didn't care what the villagers thought of her. She didn't care what they thought anymore. She knew that she could achieve anything. The main thing was not to look back. At Alexander, as he said himself, from his grandmother left a 2-room apartment. There he moved Diana and her son. What is interesting, he managed to make friends with John, but all communication with the boy occurred only on weekends. Alexander often disappeared at work, and it seemed did not hurry home. Diana saw it as a necessity. After all, having lived in the city for so many years, she had long ago realized that money does not come easily. But one day there was a quarrel between them. The fact is that Alexander had to leave urgently for important negotiations in another city. As he himself said, the well-being of their family depended on it, and it had to happen. The son fell ill. He had a fever, and his stomach began to hurt a lot. Alexander stayed, although it was obvious that he was not happy. He himself brought Diana and John to the hospital, and while the boy was examined by a doctor, he sat on a bench and booed. It's bad timing, he couldn't have been sick a week later. Diana sat next to her son and heard everything, but she didn't want to get into an argument right now. After all, they are in the hospital and what people will think of them. She had to wait until the doctor's appointment was over, and he just sent them to the hospital. Lie down for a week, we will watch the boy, said the doctor. He's got an acute respiratory infection, and the malaise in his stomach is because he's nervous. After that, Diana left the office with her son and almost attacked Alexander. Are you out of your mind? What did I say? Alexander tried to justify himself. By the way, I was in a hurry to important negotiations, and I'm paid good money for it, if you haven't forgotten. I know, but that's no reason to take out your anger on a child, Diana answered. I have a job too, by the way, so you're not the only breadwinner in the family. However, the verbal altercation had to be interrupted because the doctor came out into the corridor and asked not to clarify relations here. Alexander took Diana and her son to the children's ward. They had been admitted for a week to treat the symptoms of a cold, and Alexander had to postpone the trip. At the same time, he disappeared somewhere for a few days. Diana did not know where he was. Even his phone did not answer. And when the husband appeared, he smelled of women's perfume. Obviously, he had not bought it for himself. Diana tried to find out what was going on, but Alexander only yelled, saying that he did not have to answer to her. After they were discharged, Diana did not return home. She decided to move in with her mother for a while. Still, no matter how it was, and here she could always find support, especially since her mother herself had been asking to bring her grandson for a long time. John was glad that they were going to his grandmother, and when Diana asked him if he wanted to see Uncle Alexander, he grudgingly replied that he didn't want to help. What else? He didn't want to help, you yelled, and I'm going to talk to him after that. No, Mom, let him live alone, and we'll stay with Grandma. None of them could not think that this day would be a turning point in their fate. Naturally, Alice welcomed her daughter and grandson with open arms. She had lost a lot of weight during this time, but she was still more or less holding on. Having drunk tea from the road, they all went together to the grave of her father. Diana hadn't been to see him for 2 years. She couldn't get away because of her work. Having put flowers near the monument, she turned to her mother and quietly said, I feel that our family is falling apart. Yes, only 6 months together, and such thoughts. Alice replied sadly, maybe he has a mistress, do you think? No, Mom, he's not capable of that, Diana answered in a doubtful voice. In any case, I would definitely know about it. And especially Alexander is always at work, he has no time to have fun. To be honest, we stopped sleeping together. Or rather, he arrives so late that I can't hear him and leaves early in the morning. But at least I have time to make him breakfast. But I'm not in love anymore. I don't feel comfortable with what you're saying, the mother complained. Is your relationship really at an end? It's a rhetorical question, and you don't have to answer it. I'll answer it, Mom, Diane said. The thing is, he attributes his delays at work and his alleged business trips to the need to make more money. It's like he's the only one supporting the family. So I'm right, and he has a mistress, Alice concluded. Mom, stop guessing. And let's not talk about it anymore. The topic is closed. They really did not find the best place to discuss their daughter's marital problems. Leaving for her mother's, Diana only warned the principal at school that she was taking a vacation at her own expense. She left her husband in the dark so he wouldn't bother her, but what he was doing all this time she did not know. Alexander came only on the 5th day of her absence and tried to persuade her to return home. Well, I'm sorry, dear, I didn't mean to offend you. Putting his palms together, he mumbled pleadingly. You didn't just hurt me, Diana began. You also made my son an extra in our family. Your work is more important to you than the fact that John is sick and needs our help? Oh yeah, he's not your family, so you don't have to worry. Why would you do that? I came here in good faith. I don't understand what's going on with you, Diana continued. I thought you were friends with John. He even started calling you dad sometimes. But after what you said about him, he doesn't want to see you. Diane's son was absent. He'd gone to the store with his grandmother. But before that, he told Uncle Alexander not to even try to get in touch with him. Surprisingly, the son had matured so much lately that he reasoned like a fully educated person. Diana couldn't believe that her little John had become a more serious and responsible boy. With a shrug, Alexander stepped out onto the porch. And what's the big deal, I said, about his illness? Exactly, that you feel as if nothing has happened. In fact, every word you say stings like a hot needle. Diana finally told him what she'd been afraid to say before. Her husband almost turned white at the words he heard. What a nice family, and how beautiful it all started, he said sadly, and went to the car. I will not insist, but if you think of returning, the doors of our apartment are open for you. Without waiting for Alice and her grandson to arrive, Alexander got into the car and drove away. Diana only looked after him and cried. She could not understand who was more to blame in this situation. It is clear that Alexander made a mistake, magnifying his work, but it wasn't his whim. He was only following the instructions of his superiors. At least that's what Diana thought, piously believing that her husband was faithful to their strong relationship. 20 minutes later, her mother came in from the store. Looking at her daughter, whose face was wet with tears, he immediately asked, "Did he come?" "Yes, Mom, and we had a fight again." "What was it this time?" "I don't really know," Diana said through her tears. "But I think I'm confused." Yes, Alexander is guilty of something, but that's no reason to give up on the family. Maybe we should go back before it's too late. Diana didn't tell her mother everything, so that she wouldn't make things up. 3 days later, she packed up and came to the city. But beforehand, she called her husband that she was coming back. He was waiting for them at the entrance. "Hi, I'm sorry I didn't come myself. Work," he said guiltily. "It's okay, Liam, the mechanic, drove us to the store," Diana replied modestly. "Then let's go up to the apartment." Alexander suggested and took the heavy bags from her hands. What was her surprise when they found themselves inside? Balloons were hanging everywhere and smelled like flowers. Looking into the kitchen, Diana saw a gorgeous bouquet of roses in a crystal vase. She had not expected such a gift from her husband. "I wonder what happened to you. Why did you suddenly become so nice?" "No trick, my love. I just realized that I cannot without you," said Alexander quickly. Diana was so enthusiastic about her husband's action that she really did not notice anything suspicious. She did not want to go into the details of why her husband had changed so much. After all, not so long ago he was shouting and stomping his feet, proving his point. And here's such a picture, well, just a rainbow event. On this wave, Diana forgave him all the wrongs, and even the fact that a couple of times she saw on his shirt traces of lipstick. A new phase of their relationship had begun, if you could call it that. Diana continued to condescend to her husband's tardiness, and even the fact that he could suddenly go away for days at a time. It didn't even occur to her to ask what he did for a living. Well, manager and manager, but what exactly does he do? Hence all the prejudices that sometimes crept into her subconscious. At the same time, there were other concerns that needed attention. Recently, my mother came to visit and asked to stay for a week. She was diagnosed with diabetes and needed to undergo a comprehensive examination. Naturally, Diana could not refuse, and her husband kept silent, saying that he was working late and was unlikely to be disturbed by anyone. Again, there was a note of dissatisfaction, as if he was doing a favor. Alexander's mother arrived unexpectedly. Her mother-in-law did not often spoil them with her presence. Therefore, Diana was even surprised when Tamara Borisovna came to visit in the evening. "Diana, how you look so much better. Right from the doorstep," said her mother-in-law. "That's what I thought. That country color will do you good." Turning to her sister-in-law, she continued, "And thank you, Alice, for taking Diana in." It was hard to say what it was, but judging by the tone of the conversation, the mother-in-law was snickering. Now it is clear in whom Alexander went. As they say, the apple does not fall far from the tree. Having put the kettle on the stove, Diana invited everyone to the table. "I've baked a charlotte, so let's try the dessert." Tamara and Alice sat opposite each other and stared at one point. They were looking at John, who was sitting in a chair and reading a book. It was a good thing the boy didn't see it, or he wouldn't have liked it. After tasting the charlotte, Tamara Borisovna turned to Diana with a suggestion. "Listen, let's do this. If Alexander starts to show his temper again, you call me immediately. And don't even try to argue with him. In such a state, he is simply unpredictable." "No, let it better come to me, and that calmer," objected Alice. "I don't want my daughter to shake with fear." "Maybe you think that Diana is holding on to the apartment." No, sisters-in-law," Tamara cooed. "I didn't mean anything by it. It's just that you should always find a compromise, not run away from home at the first difficulty. Isn't that right, Diana?" Diana nodded reluctantly, but immediately added, "You don't have to run away, but you don't have to be the boss of the family either. We earn money together, and I've never accused him of living on my money." "That's good. I think that the conflict is over," quite pronounced mother-in-law, and began to pack up. "I'm going home. I won't stay any longer. And if you don't mind, Diana, don't tell Sacha that I came." What it could mean, Diana did not know, but she complied with her request, and when her husband came home from work, did not inform him of his mother's arrival. How naive she was to think that her husband knew nothing. But it turned out that he was aware of everything that was going on in the apartment. A few weeks later, he left again on a business trip, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But a day later, Diana saw him outside the supermarket. He was getting out of the car and talking to someone on the phone. Alexander did not notice his wife, although she did not try to hide. Apparently, he was so busy that he didn't even look around. And here we must give credit to Diana's restraint. She didn't rush to decide and didn't try to find out how he had gotten here. On the contrary, Diana decided to wait for him to come home. All this time she had been hard at work preparing her speech. It seemed to her that this time she would be able to find out the whole truth. However, everything turned out differently. Alexander arrived, but had no time to enter the apartment as immediately rushed away. And only an hour later he called and said that urgent business. Well, how not to argue with him after that, Diana thought. Patience was running out, and they had not lived together for a year. Diana already regretted getting together with him. At the same time, there was still a little hope that her husband would improve. At least that's what Diana wanted to believe. Everything turned inside her at the thought of having to part. Alexander wouldn't lose anything, but she would have to rent a place again, or, at the very least, go to her mother's village. The second option was not very encouraging, and Diana decided to the last to fight with the antics of her husband. But everything changed when one day she found an envelope in the mailbox. Usually the mail her husband checked, but because of his alleged work, he completely forgot about these duties. And what was her surprise when she read the sender's details? It was the bank's security service. But what's interesting is that the letter came in her name, even though she wasn't registered in the apartment. Trying to remember where the legs grew from and what kind of loan, Diana began to review her documents. They were all in place, and where could they go if she had not done anything serious lately? And then, quite unexpectedly, the information Alexander asked for my passport when he wanted to agree about the house popped up in her head. My husband had indeed talked about it 4 months ago. Then he bragged that soon they would be able to live in nature, and even showed the house, which they were selling at a reduced price. But Diana did not pay any attention to this, considering that her spouse was just fantasizing. However, he did not stop and proposed to start preparing the documents. Diana agreed, but because she was busy at school, she could not go to all sorts of offices with him. Alexander said that he would take everything into his own hands. She would only need a passport and one more identity document. Diana did not have a driver's license, so she gave her insurance certificate. Most likely, it was then that her husband took out a loan on her, but he acted somehow secretly because she did not realize it. Once again, after reading the letter that came to her name, Diana learned that the arrears on the loan is exactly 4 months, and if you add up the amount of debt and accrued interest, it turned out to be a lot. Diana didn't have that kind of money, and there was nowhere to get it. It was urgent to pull out her husband and demand an explanation, and he did not make himself wait. He appeared in the middle of the night and sent that between them all over, and then he brazenly confessed that he'd been spending money on mistresses. "Yes, Diana, that's what I was doing," Alexander shouted. "You're such a—" Diana wanted to swear, but restrained herself. "I know what you think of me, but I don't care about that." Alexander continued and waved her off, slamming the front door behind him. Just like that, not even a year passed, and the family happiness shattered like broken glass. Mom was right about the mistress. Diana was wrong not to believe her then, and now she wouldn't have to stand there and listen to all these nasty things. Alexander turned out to be a despicable man. He had attempted to humiliate and trample on the person close to him. Diana packed her things in a hurry and left the apartment. She had to dial the number on her phone several times until her mother answered. Hearing her daughter's crying voice, Alice realized everything come home. That's enough, you have profited from the family. And again, Diana had to take a vacation to take care of all the problems. It was good that the director met her needs and did not refuse. He was loyal to Diana, and he always helped her if she needed it. Besides, he knew firsthand what it was like to raise a child. He didn't consider Alexander a decent father. Apparently, he was quite familiar with his family and did not expect anything good from them. For 2 weeks, Diana lived with her mother until she found a new place to live. During that time, she came to her senses. "You can imagine, and he lied to me that he got the apartment from his grandmother," she said. "Yeah, how come?" "He looks like a decent guy," Alice replied in surprise. "That's right, a decent guy, but he pulled off a scam that I wouldn't dream of." Diana continued. "I don't even know what to do with this loan. We lived in a common law marriage, and all the burden of payments falls on my shoulders. Daughter, of course, I will help with money, but it will not be enough anyway. Offer her mother's help. Don't, you better keep it, in case you need it for medicine." Diana refused. "I'll try to borrow money from friends. In extreme case, I'll give it from my salary." Diana could not even imagine what was ahead of her. Alexander so skillfully sedated her vigilance that he was able to formalize in the bank's solicited credit, and how he had managed to do it without her permission. It is clear that through fake people, but where to find them, God only knows. And this damn apartment, which, as it turned out, did not belong to him. He just paid a year's rent in advance and pretended it was his grandmother's inheritance. No one had ever deceived her like that, and she naively believed that she had found her love. Diana also remembered how she once talked to her friends on the phone and told them what a good husband Alexander was. She even sent his picture over the phone. But her friends, for some reason, in one voice assured her that it was the wrong choice. What alerted them then, Diana never realized, but she was at the very beginning of family happiness and did not want to scare away the luck. That's why she was skeptical of her friends' suspicions. Who knows who doesn't happen to whom, suddenly jealous. Diana strived with every fiber of her being to strengthen relations with Alexander. That's why she didn't listen to Alice and Annie's advice. But if she had turned on her brains and would not have blindly trusted everything, she would not be in the situation in which she is now. As for the loan, there was no money from acquaintances to pay it off. Everyone had their own problems. Mom suggested selling the house, but Diana strictly forbade to do it. "Don't do it, Mom. I'll never forgive myself," she said indignantly. "But you won't find that kind of money anyway," her mother pleaded with her. "So what will they do to me? I'll find a way out of it. I've been in trouble before." Diana began to give some money from her paycheck, but it was only enough to pay the interest. By then, Alexander had disappeared from the city. He did not appear at his mother's house and did not answer the phone. With a squeaky heart, Diana turned to the policia. But there she was told that if everything was done according to her documents and there were signatures, then everything was considered legal. The hopelessness was even more pressing, and she had to literally twist and turn to make ends meet. As a last resort, Diana turned to Alexander's mother, but she replied that she had nothing to do with his scams, and demanded not to be disturbed. By some miracle, but the investigator who was given Diana's statement, nevertheless, opened the case and even declared Alexander wanted. Now it remained to wait for him to be caught and shake out all the money. Diana was preparing for a difficult change in her life. Some of the money was helped by her colleagues at work, but they too could not perform a miracle to pay off the loan in full. Diana thought about going to the bank itself and persuading them to cover the debt somehow. But who would go for that? After all, creditors are not stupid people to forgive such money. If they were to meet everyone's needs, they would have gone bankrupt long ago. As time went on, the debt problem didn't disappear. On the contrary, it grew like a snowball. The interest on the loan added even more payments. Diana could only manage to pay the modest crumbs. She had to explain to her son why she couldn't buy him new shoes. But he himself understood everything and often remembered Alexander in an unkind word. Diana at such moments did not stop her son, realizing that it was useless. On New Year's vacation, they wanted to go to the village to his mother. But Alice herself came to visit. And not empty-handed. She brought a whole bag of supplies. "I knew you wanted to spend your vacation at my place," said her mother in a panting voice. "Mom, why are you coming to town in winter?" Diana asked in surprise. "Well, how could I, my daughter, to see you? And I mean to rest," she answered cheerfully. "But don't worry, there's someone to look after the house. I asked Guinea, our neighbor. You know her, she's been taking care of you since you were a little girl." She had the sweetest peers on the street. Diana laughed and thought for a moment. Diana felt as if she were back in her childhood, where there were no worries and troubles. They had their own games, secret places and paths. No one even thought about what to eat or where to sleep. Parents were responsible for that, and they just had a fun and carefree childhood. True, over time, responsibilities were added, but they were still comfortable under the wing of mom and dad. Now there is no such thing, and you have to achieve everything yourself. However, fate has somehow unfairly dealt with her, hitting the bottom. First, she brought her together with a beautiful and young man, and then made it so that he betrayed and abandoned her. Diana even turned cold at the thought. "Oh my God, it's happening again. I've been through this before, haven't I?" She remembered the major she had given birth to John. He too had sworn his love at first, but it all ended quickly when it became known that she was pregnant. Here, and with Alexander turned out almost the same, with minor adjustments to the financial component. This man turned out to be even more cunning. Not only that he abandoned, but also hung debts. Diana was in an unenviable position, and if it were not for her mother, there is no telling how it would have ended up. "Listen, daughter, where is your jewelry shop?" Mom asked out of the blue. "A block away," Diana replied without any thought. "And why do you want it, if it's not a secret?" "Yes, I would give our family valuables for repair," Alice calmly answered, pulling out 2 gold brooches from her purse. "These were left by my great-grandmother," Diana said in surprise, "and I thought that you sold them long ago. After all, at one time when money was difficult, we barely made ends meet." "That's right, my daughter, we did the best we could," said her mother. "But I just took extra shifts, that's why we survived. I couldn't sell those brooches, they're as precious as a memory, and the time wasn't right for that." "What do you mean?" Diana asked warily. "Well, I wanted you to get married." Alice hesitated. "And you never got married. This experience of family life I do not count. It did not go in your favor. And I'm sorry I didn't see that man as a traitor." "Oh, come on, Mom. What's past is past. By the way, he's wanted. Maybe they'll catch him, and then you won't have to pay for the loan anymore." Alice nodded in response and immediately put the valuables back in her purse. Diana didn't see anything red in what her mother had asked about the jewelry shop. The brooches did look unpresentable and needed minor repairs, but it was gold, and it was valuable in any form. The only question was the price. Diana got the idea only on the 3rd day, when her mother went there several times. She realized that she wanted to help her with the loan and was ready to sell even the family heirlooms. Naturally, Diana did not want to make such sacrifices to save her. That's why she followed her mother, and when she saw that her trips were not connected with the jewelry workshop, but led directly to the pawn shop, she did not hesitate for a second to stop further attempts to negotiate the sale of brooches with impudent and unceremonious usurers. Alice was stunned when she caught her daughter in the pawn shop premises. "What are you doing here?" "That's the question I wanted to ask you, Mom," Diana interrupted her. "Yeah, I guess I'll have to drive home and talk to you there." Refusing to sell brooches, Alice obediently followed Diana. Her daughter was silent the whole way while they rode on the bus. and only at home she screamed, "Yes, how could you dare to do such a thing?" "What could I do?" Alice wailed. "I knew you couldn't pay off the loan on your own. But I wrote a statement on Alexander," began Diana. "Don't be ridiculous, daughter," her mother replied with a smile on her face. "No one will be looking for him. They just made it look like they were working. They need reporting for their quarterly bonus, so they're just blowing dust in their eyes." Once again, Diane was brought back down to earth. Once again, she's given a cold shower and brought back to her senses, and she realizes that it's all just her fantasies that she'd better get rid of. Mom is right. The Policecia won't look for Alexander unless it's in their interest to do so. It's not hard to guess that grease needs to be greased to speed up the search. But Diana had no money for such expenses, and what to do next, again unclear. It was a kind of vicious circle from which it was impossible to find a way out. It was good that the family heirlooms had been saved. Diana could not call her mother to sell them. She would have been heartbroken if she had. But debts had to be dealt with somehow. The thought of going to the bank came to her again. There were 6 days left till the end of the New Year holidays, and Diana decided to devote this time to a full-fledged vacation with her family. Just in case, Alice called her neighbor and made sure that everything was in order with the house, finally calmed down. They all celebrated Christmas together, even caroling. John saw for the first time what it was like to sing a carol and receive a sweet gift for it. All worries were pushed to the background. They could not be solved during the holidays anyway, so why spoil their mood? Diana cooked second courses and salads, and her mother baked pies. They turned out to be a good tandem, and once in between, Alice again talked about her daughter to return to the village, Ma. "Well, please, let's not touch on this subject." Diane took on a Vamalisla. "I told you the reasons why I don't want to go back." "Yes, I know, daughter, but I want to see you around," said Alice dreamily. "I want to hold my grandson in my arms while I have strength, help him with his lessons and feed him delicious pies." Hearing about the pies, John also decided to join the conversation. "That's right, Grandma, I like your pies very much." "I'll bet you do, sweet tooth," Diana laughed, patting him on the head. Well, I won't insist," Alice summarized. "Time will come, and you will decide what is best for you. But I think that my dream will come true, and we will be together again. If anything, that's what your grandmother wished for at Christmas. Who knew miracles could come true? It seems like an ordinary wish to live together as a family, but how much sincerity and kindness is in it? Well, how could you refuse Alice? Of course not, and fate decided to reward her for all her efforts. After all, not for nothing she went to sell the family brooches. A mother's heart feels everything, and it can't be silenced. The last days of winter vacation flew by, and it was time to go to the bank. Diana had prepared herself in advance for the possibility that she would simply be refused help. She knew about such cases when people found themselves in difficult life situations, could not pay off their loans, and the banks did not meet their needs and did not reduce their monthly payments. They didn't care where poor people would get money. Mom returned to the village, but asked to be kept in the loop about the debts. Alice hinted that she still had the brooches with her and they could be sold at any time. Diana, however, replied with a firm refusal. "No, Mom, and that's the end of it." "All right, sweetheart, but remember that I'm always with you." It was with this thought in mind that Diana walked into the bank on an early January morning. There weren't many people there. Apparently everyone was still sleeping. Taking a coupon, she waited for an invitation. Sitting on the soft couch, Diana thought about what to say to the manager to make him take pity. She will not, in fact, in front of him to shed tears. He wouldn't even listen, just ask security to escort her out. When it was her turn, Diana got up from her chair and approached Stalisic. The manager scrutinized her through the thin lenses of her glasses and said, "Good afternoon. We are glad you came to us. I would like to talk to you about reducing my loan debt." Diana began timidly. "Ah, that's it," mumbled the manager. "If you are having financial difficulties, we can consider a restructuring plan. Give us your documents and the loan agreement." Diana took out of the bag all the loan papers that were there. Then from her inside pocket, she took out her passport. "Here, this is all I have on me," she said. The manager ducked into the contract and began to scrutinize it, and with every word he read it became clear that he would not help her. Shrugging his shoulders, the manager said sternly and unhappily, "So you have large delinquencies on the loan. In addition, you have accrued a decent amount of interest. Here restructuring will not help, only full repayment of debt obligations or seizure of property through the court. But what to do? Cried Diana. I have a child in my arms, my salary is not so big, and from the property only furniture, because we live in a rented apartment. Well, I'm not a patron of the arts and I can't help you, the manager said dryly. Diana got up from the chair and slowly wandered toward the exit, and just at that moment, it seems, the manager had an epiphany. Wait, you can turn to the bank manager. And what? He's gonna pay off my loan for me? Diana asked without any hope for a positive answer. I can't say anything about that, but he often helps people with similar problems. The manager smiled and pointed to the manager's door. Diana went to it and knocked gently. After a minute, a secretary came out of there. Good afternoon, you wanted something. I was told by your manager that I could talk to the manager, Diana answered uncertainly. I see, then you'll have to wait a little longer, the receptionist said. Henry has a meeting and won't be free for an hour. Okay, if you want me to sit here, Diane pointed to a chair near the office. Yes, please. Maybe I could get you a cup of coffee. No, don't, or I'll stutter when I talk to the manager, Diana joked at her suggestion. Those 60 minutes seemed like an eternity to her. Diana tried not to fall asleep and kept watching the bank employees going back and forth. Gradually, more and more people came in, each with their own problems. Some approached the managers and others left. Diana looked at the wall clock every now and then, counting the minutes. The hands moved so slowly that they seemed to have stopped altogether. In the meantime, one thought after another flashed through her mind. At first, she wanted to tell the manager directly so that he could decide her fate. But then she gave up this idea because he was not a psychologist and was not obliged to listen to her tearful complaints. It was necessary to somehow differently approach him with the question of debt relief. Finally, the meeting came to an end. People in expensive suits and with folders in their hands began to come out of the manager's office. The secretary reappeared and said in a gentle voice, "You may go in. Henry is waiting for you." Diana stood up and headed toward the door. At that moment, her legs shook and she almost fell. It was a good thing the secretary was nearby and had time to give her a hand. "Calm down. Our manager is a good man. He will definitely help." Nodding in response, Diana crossed the threshold of the office. In front of her stood a massive oak desk, and in the chair at the other end sat a middle-aged man, closer to her age. Taking a closer look, Diana almost shuddered with surprise. More than 10 years had passed, and he hadn't changed much. The same curls, the same nose, and the same smile. After so many years, she met the beggar from the train station again. After all, it was to him she had given the last money for the ticket, and now he's sitting in the bank manager's chair in front of her. Wow, how fate has turned, Diana said admiringly. Excuse me, woman, what are you talking about? The manager asked incomprehensively. Well, the train station, money for a ticket, an angry conductor, and a young girl. The manager blushed in surprise. Diana, it can't be you. Probably me, only 10 years later, Diana joked. Standing up from the chair, the manager came to her and hugged her tightly. Diana couldn't resist the feeling. She patted him on the shoulders too and said, "That's how it is, Henry, when you don't think about anything and life throws you surprises," Diana said cheerfully. "No, of course I hoped we'd see each other again. To be honest, for the first 2 months, because I wanted to return the money and give it to my parents. They were so mad when they found out I'd helped a poor guy with it. Even sketched out what you looked like and why you needed the money. I'm sorry, Diane, I was going to come, but circumstances got so bad I had to postpone the trip for a while. And then I got caught up in the moment, and it just slipped my mind. Hey, Henry, you never told me why you didn't have the money, did you?" Diana asked cautiously. "It's because I'm the son of a big banker," Henry began, "and I was kidnapped for ransom. They took everything they had, my phone, my money, but for some reason they left my passport behind. I managed to escape, and the first thing I did was go to the Policia. But they didn't believe me and sent me away, telling me not to come to them again, a dirty bum. I didn't look very presentable, to be honest." "That's right, even the conductor didn't want to let you on the train," laughed Diana. "Good for you. I like your sense of humor," Henry said. "So with no money and no cell phone, I decided to go home. I had to go to the train station and ask people for money. And thank God you were in my way. I'll be indebted to you for the rest of my life." Even so, Diana shook her head. "Yeah, that's right. By the way, what happened to you? I don't have bank customers coming to me for small talk. Well, since you're the manager, I'll try to tell you my problem, Diana said with a heavy sigh and told Henry everything that had happened to her over the past 10 years. At the end, she asked for help with her loan debts as she had been victimized by a scam artist. Henry thought for a moment and then called his secretary over to him. Georgia, would you be so kind as to bring me the credit file on Diane? The secretary left, and 10 minutes later the very same manager walked into the manager's office. Here it is, Henry, and placing the file on his desk, he left at once. Leafing through the papers, the manager studied all the details of the loan agreement, and naturally, he could not but realize what problems there were. However, after 5 minutes he broke away from reading and said, I'll help with the loan, especially since I owe you so much. Thank you, Henry, you are my last hope, Diana said cheerfully. Just as you had been when you helped me buy my ticket and paid the conductor to let me on the train. A few days later, Henry came to her house. He brought good news. I talked to your father about you, and he gave me the okay to close the loan. You don't know anyone else, but there's one problem. What's that? Don't tell me my son and his future children will be paying for this loan. No, don't worry, that won't happen, Henry said with a laugh. We've joined the search for Alexander, and he owes us now, so I'm sorry, but we're not just going to let him go. Oh, that's it, Diana smiled. Well, then take him down with everything you've got, and it's worth it if you beat the catch out of him. Let him know how to cheat gullible women. By the way, I did some checking, and it turns out that you're not the first on this marriage scammers list, Henry continued. But I think he's bound to stumble somewhere and fall into the hands of the Polycesia. The debt problems were resolved, and Diana was finally able to breathe easy. She no longer had to think about where to get the money to pay the loan. Diana just couldn't help sharing this pleasant news with her mom, and she promised to come over the other day to thank Henry in person. Meanwhile, Diana's savior invited her and her son to a restaurant. He wanted to treat them to some delicious French cuisine. Don't think anything bad, Diane, Henry tried to explain himself. It's okay, I wasn't thinking anything, Diane reassured him. That evening Henry confessed his love for her. He told her that he had noticed how beautiful she was, but things were moving fast and he had to hurry. But now they are not in a hurry and can talk about everything. Diana reciprocated and made it clear that she was ready for a relationship. She only put a condition that they were on mutual trust. Soon Alice arrived. She wanted to see in person the man for whom her daughter had sacrificed the last of her money 10 years ago. She liked Henry and said she would like a son-in-law like him. The hint was taken quite seriously, and sometime later Henry proposed to Diana. And in this case she agreed, for she could not find a better candidate. All the more so as John accepted him with confidence. And the son had learned to be a good judge of character. He said that behind Nicholas' mom will be like a stone wall. Diana listened to the words of her son and decided to link his fate with him. By the way, the search for Alexander was successful and he was soon caught trying another scam. It seems that the potential victim got smart and did not let himself be deceived. He faces an impressive sentence for all his financial frauds. Diana and Henry are getting ready to get married and are even thinking about having a child together. But that's not all. Henry has offered to buy a mansion for the whole family and just next to their home village. It looks like Alice's dream is starting to come true, and soon they will all be living together.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.